Good afternoon. Let me make a few preliminary statements just to, before I get into some of the more detailed information with regard to trying to clear up some of the confusion that's occurred over that came as a result of the Chris Boyd plea last Friday. But let me first of all reiterate a couple of things. We've said all along that our office is not going to try this case in the media, and I think we have tried to adhere to that requirement as strictly as we possibly can. We intend to continue to do that. But it is difficult when a case such as this gets as much attention and much interest from the various media outlets, which then contribute story after story after story, and sometimes rumor after rumor after rumor. Ethically, though, we are limited in what we can say about the facts of any case that's pending in court. These cases, and we've always taken this position, have to be tried in court. That's where the facts come out, not in the media. Now, that being said, I'm going to try to clear up a little bit of what's been confusing that after or following the Chris Boyd plea. Remember, we're talking about two separate but related cases. We have the case involving the 4 former Vanderbilt students that are charged with various counts of aggravated rape and aggravated sexual battery. That's one case in a different court. In Judge Dozier's court, Chris Boyd's case was in front of him, which, while related to that first case, was about a different issue, which was actions that were taken following the incident following the incident. So on Friday, this office, was dealing with the Chris Boyd case. And the facts that were read dealt with the Chris Boyd case. Those of you that have any experience in covering criminal court cases know that when there's a guilty plea, there is a requirement that there be a factual statement to indicate that there is a factual basis upon which, number one, that a crime's been committed, and a factual basis to accept a guilty plea. Because of the nature of this case, because of the high-profile nature of this case, working with Mr. Boyd's attorney, we worked on and agreed upon statement of the salient facts that related to Mr. Boyd's guilty plea. So that on Friday, when the plea was entered, we read the facts as agreed upon. It was important to us, as part of that process, that all of the text messages that Mr. Boyd either sent or received would be part of that guilty plea and part of that factual statement. General Thurman read the statement, again, as agreed upon with Mr. Boyd's attorney. Following that, Judge Dozier, as part of every guilty plea, asked Mr. Boyd if that factual statement was true. The importance here is this distinction. What he was asking is the facts as read by General Thurman, meaning that the text, I'm just focusing on the text right now, that the text sent and received, that those texts were in fact sent and received. Judge Dozier did not ask, Mr. Boyd did not say whether all the information in those texts was correct, accurate. Now, do you understand where I'm coming from? He was asking those text messages that the state says you sent and those text messages that the state says you received, did you in fact send or receive those? And by his acknowledgement, he was saying that yes, in fact, he had received or sent those. To date, our investigation shows that with regard to the apparent reference to Mr. Carter Samuels, Mr. Boyd was in error. But again, at the time of Mr. Boyd's plea, that was not what he was asked. That's was not what he was responding to. And that's not what that plea agreement was all about. When there is a ultimate disposition, however that may be, on the aggravated rape and aggravated sexual battery charges, I am certain that more evidence and more information will become available. But at present, we're not at liberty to go into that. And so with that explanation, I'll take any questions.
General, knowing what we know now, should General Thurman, or do you wish that General Thurman in open court would have clarified the accuracy of the information in the text as it referred to Carter Samuels?
Well, I guess if we had had a crystal ball and realized where some of the media accounts were going to go, but I'm afraid that it would also been only added to the confusion. And immediately afterwards to then try to explain, well, now wait a minute, you've got to understand this is a guilty plea over here, but there's a statement in here. I mean, we can look at that, hindsight's 20/20, but that's what prompted our subsequent release to try to clarify that. Once we saw that it was sort of taking a life of its own. But frankly, that day, we were interested in two things. We were interested in having a factual statement that Mr. Boyd and our office agreed to that was the result of the guilty plea, and, frankly, clearing up another misconception that had to do with Coach Franklin.
Did nobody think that dropping the name of the starting quarterback as having potentially moved the rape victim back into the room where she was raped would merit attention at all? Nobody thought of that?
Did anybody ask about that after the plea?
I don't recall.
I don't think anybody did. So, it's the kind of thing I could ask you. Why didn't you ask about it? I mean, the point is, yeah, if we had, as I just said to Scott, if we had had a crystal ball or with 20/20 hindsight, I think that's true. We have, but at the time, we were focused on Mr. Boyd's plea, and the facts that were contained in it. And as I say, to the extent that, and that's why, that to the extent that it started to take a life of its own, we felt that it was important at that time to come out and try to clarify that we've got two different issues here.
Can you tell us how this could possibly happen as far as Boyd, a former teammate, wrongly identifying another teammate? Was this an autocorrect issue, or can you give us any indication?
I can't answer that at this point, but I'll say this just as a general observation. Mr. Boyd is not the first witness, nor the last, that's ever been mistaken about particular facts or in error about particular facts. And at this point, beyond that, I can't speculate as to why or how Carter Samuels' name was included in the text.
Can you tell if Austin Carter Samuels was there that night?
I can't get into any other details about that.
Generally, are you concerned at all from a legal standpoint that, I guess the text message is being read, and I certainly understand how it happened, that it could result in either defamation or a false light claim by Carter Samuels?
No. I mean, I really don't. I mean, what's in there is what's in there. Now, as I say, it took a life of its own. We've attempted to clarify that. But other facts, beyond that, we're going to have to wait and see how this case rolls out. And as I just said, those are facts and subjects that we just are not at liberty to speak about at this time.
Let me follow up with this. Could the text message, as it came out, and knowing what we know now that Mr. Boyd made a mistake in saying what he said, could that have any impact on the criminal charges against the other defendants in the case?
I'm not going to speculate about it. I mean, as I say, Mr. Boyd may well be a witness in this case, but beyond that, I wouldn't be right to speculate on that.
In that seventh text message, she talks about moving her. Did he actually help move her?
Who are we talking about?
Mr. Boyd? Did Mr. Boyd ever help move the victim?
Again, I'm not going to get into all that. I'm just getting into what the text messages said, all right? Because I don't want to, because then again, we're back, remember, we've got two cases here. And so I'm got to be very careful that I'm not talking about the cases involving the aggravated rape and aggravated sexual battery charge.
Text message that says me.
I'm not going to try to interpret it,
helped us
okay?
move her out of the hole.
It says what it says. I mean, and again, I go back to I'd give you the same caution that's caused this confusion originally, which is on the plea, on the date of the plea, what Mr. Boyd is attesting to is I sent and received those texts. That's it. That's all he's vouching for.
Does that make Mr. Boyd less effective as a witness?
Again, as I said, he's not going to be the only witness that's ever been mistaken or in error about something that they said or the subsequent investigation may have shown wasn't accurate. But we'll deal with that in the subsequent case.
Can we get a sense of who was there?
No, you can't get a sense of that because that's goes to the other case.
Your office also put out a release talking about the idea that moving the victim might not necessarily be a criminal matter, a criminal charge. I guess sort of the distinction between charging somebody and them being a witness. Can you elaborate on that?
Between being a defendant and being a witness?
Correct.
I'm not sure I understand. If you're a defendant, you've been charged with a crime.
No, but there's a distinction that you guys have made that just because you were there or have knowledge of it, that you aren't necessarily criminally
Well,
responsible.
again, we're on a very fine line about what we can talk about. But let me say this. Based on our investigation and what we've looked at, if their only activity was to move the victim in this case from point A to point B, in our opinion, that's not a crime. If there was more involved, that might be a different matter. But again, I don't want to, I'm just saying, if there's more involved, what that means is for another day. But I'm just saying that that's, and as we said at the time on Friday, we don't anticipate there to be any other criminal charges.
Just on top of that, even if it's moving it back into the room of somebody that is accused of actually having raped her?
I can only reiterate what I just said, okay?
Did Vanderbilt have any conversations with your office about clarifying the state of Mr. Torry Samuels?
No.
Has the university had any conversation with your office over the last week?
We have been in contact with the general counsel's office throughout this on more than one occasion. But with regard to Mr. Carter Samuels, Coach Franklin, or any of those things, they've had no contact with me about that.
General, as a follow-up to that, if you can, did Austin Carter Samuels or his representation, if he has representation, did they contact your office?
No.
Asking for a clarification? Why did you guys feel like you needed to do it then?
Well, I think that we saw that it did seem, we had tried to indicate there were not going to be any more criminal charges, that Mr. Carter Samuels was listed as a witness, because we were trying very carefully not to again comment on the evidence in this other case. When we realized that that wasn't sufficient, I mean, in other words, that the confusion and the conversation continued, we felt that we had to go a little bit further and say that was and draw the line, say that there was based on our investigation that was what Mr. Boyd texted was incorrect.
Were you surprised at all when Carter Samuels had an opportunity to speak for his own self on Monday, when he could have just stood up and said, hey, I didn't do that, this is a misunderstanding?
I mean, I'm not gonna respond, I don't know, I mean, no, I wasn't surprised, well, I didn't, I only saw that well after the fact, and I don't know.
Gee, I know that you guys have said that now you believe it, well, now you know it's Vanderwall and another unidentified student who helped move the victim, not Austin Carter Samuels. Do you know who that unidentified victim is?
Again, I'm not gonna get into all that, because we're trying to keep down the amount of speculation and the amount of potentially inaccurate information as much as we can. And I mean, certainly, we did not anticipate that it would create quite the stir that it did. We were a little more focused on Mr. Boyd and quite frankly, Coach Franklin, because some of that, the way that had been spun. And so, as I say, with regard to Mr. Carter Samuels, that was not something that was high on our list at that point. What else? Anything else?
Les, can you
Yeah.
tell us if I know you have video surveillance from the hallway, can you tell us if it clears up who was there and who was not there?
No, I just can't, I've got nothing else to add at this point. If there's anything else about Mr. Boyd's plea, that's fine, but otherwise, we're just getting into things that I'm gonna say I can't comment about. All right? Thank you.